The message arrived at exactly 11:43 p.m. There was no sender name, no profile picture, just a single line glowing on my screen asking me to meet at Blackridge High School after midnight. I stared at it longer than I should have, fully aware that the school had been abandoned for 2 years after an incident no one dared to explain. Every instinct told me to ignore the message, yet curiosity has a way of overpowering fear. And that curiosity was the reason we found ourselves standing outside the school gates that night.
Rifat was the first to break the tension, laughing it off and calling the whole thing a stupid prank, but his voice sounded forced even to himself. Tania didn't respond at all. She kept staring at the building as if it were quietly observing us. The gate wasn't locked, which felt wrong, and the silence around us was even worse. There were no insects, no distant traffic, nothing but the echo of our own footsteps as we stepped inside, each sound lingering far longer than it should have.
The moment we crossed into the main hallway, the clock struck midnight. Not rang, but struck, like a warning. Every light flickered simultaneously, as if the building itself had inhaled. Nabil whispered that something felt wrong, his voice shaking despite his attempt to stay calm. I pulled out my phone, only to find there was no signal, no internet, just one new notification waiting for us. The message was short, but chillingly clear. Do not separate. That was when we heard footsteps ahead of us, slow and deliberate, echoing through the hallway with no visible source. Rifat moved forward despite our hesitation, insisting someone was just trying to scare us. The classroom door creaked open on its own, revealing nothing but old desks, a cracked chalkboard, and something far worse, fresh footprints on the dusty floor that led into the room and stopped abruptly in the center, as if whoever walked there had simply vanished. When we turned back, Nabil was gone. There had been no scream, no sound of footsteps running away, only a sudden emptiness where he had been standing moments ago. His backpack lay on the floor, his phone still recording. On the screen, letters began typing by themselves, forming a message none of us were ready to read. 1 stays, 3 remain. That was the moment we realized the truth. The school wasn't abandoned, it was awake, and it had already chosen its first victim. We ran, or at least we thought we did, but no matter how long we kept moving, the hallway never seemed to end. Every locker looked the same. Every broken tile repeated itself like a bad memory stuck on loop. Tania was the first to realize it, whispering that we had passed the same dented locker 3 times already. Panic crept into Rifat's voice as he insisted we just needed to keep going, but the more we moved forward, the more the school felt like it was folding in on itself, trapping us inside a corridor with no beginning and no end. When we finally stopped, our flashlights caught something carved into the wall beneath layers of old paint and forgotten posters. The words looked rushed, desperate, as if someone had scratched them in their final moments. The school takes what it is owed. None of us spoke, but the meaning settled heavily in our chests. This place wasn't random, and whatever had happened here before wasn't finished. The message on Nabil's phone replayed in my head, and for the first time I wondered if we had already agreed to rules we didn't understand. A loud bang shattered the silence, exploding from inside the nearest classroom and making all 3 of us jump back instinctively. Rifat cursed under his breath, his bravado finally cracking as the door slammed shut on its own. For just a split second, I saw something move in the reflection of a broken mirror near the door, a tall, distorted shadow that didn't match any of us. When I turned around, there was nothing there, but the echo of that sound lingered, pounding in my chest like a second heartbeat. The intercom crackled to life without warning, filling the hallway with static that scraped against our nerves. A voice followed, distorted and emotionless, repeating a phrase that made my stomach drop. "Attendance is mandatory. absence will be corrected." Tania's face went pale as she realized what it meant, and none of us needed to say it out loud. The school wasn't just watching us, it was counting us, and someone missing was something it intended to fix. At the end of the hallway, where there had been nothing moments ago, a door now stood waiting for us. The paint was clean, almost new, and the sign read Classroom 12B, a room none of us remembered existing. Rifat reached for the handle before I could stop him, his hand trembling despite his effort to appear calm. As his fingers touched the knob, my phone vibrated again in my pocket, and I already knew the message would tell us something we weren't ready to hear. Classroom 12B felt wrong the moment we stepped inside. While the rest of the school was decaying and broken, this room looked preserved, as if time had skipped over it. The desks were aligned perfectly, the chalkboard clean, and the air felt colder than the hallway outside. Tania whispered that it reminded her of a place pretending to be normal, and I couldn't disagree. My phone buzzed again in my pocket, and I didn't want to look, because some part of me already knew the school was about to explain its rules. On the teacher's desk lay an attendance register, its pages yellowed and brittle. As we watched, a pen rolled across the desk by itself and began writing a name we all recognized, Nabil. The final column marked him absent, and before we could react, the word slowly scratched itself out, replaced with something far worse, transferred. Rifat backed away, shaking his head in denial, but the truth was settling in. The school didn't consider Nabil missing, it considered him moved. The intercom crackled again, but this time the voice wasn't cold or mechanical. It was familiar. Nabil's voice filled the room, calm and distant, as if he were speaking from very far away. He told us not to look for him, that the school was only doing what it always does. Tania covered her mouth to stop herself from crying, and I felt something break inside me as I realized the voice didn't sound scared anymore. It sounded accepted. Chalk began moving across the board by itself, writing questions in slow, deliberate strokes. It asked why we were here, what we remembered about the night the school closed, and whether we believed we deserved to leave. Each question felt less like a test and more like an accusation. Memories I hadn't thought about in years started surfacing, fragments of rumors, screams, and a fire alarm that never stopped ringing. The school wasn't hunting us, it was judging us. Rifat finally broke, his confidence collapsing as he admitted something none of us had expected. On the night the school closed, he had been here, sneaking in after hours with friends, messing around near the science wing. He confessed that they had triggered the fire alarm for fun and run away laughing, unaware that a night guard was still inside. The room fell silent as the weight of his words sank in, and for the first time the school felt less like a monster and more like a place filled with unfinished grief. The classroom lights dimmed as the walls around us seemed to dissolve into memory. I saw flashes of the night the school closed, pieced together not from facts, but from guilt and rumor. The fire alarm screaming endlessly, emergency lights staining the corridors red, and a night guard running toward the science wing, unaware that the alarm had been set as a joke. The school wasn't showing us this to scare us. It was reminding us of the moment it was abandoned, of the moment it was left unfinished. The chalk returned to the board, writing slower this time, as if choosing its words carefully. It explained the rule we had been circling since the beginning. The school keeps those who carry guilt and releases those who only witnessed it. I felt a chill run through me as I realized why Nabil had been taken first. He had known what happened that night and never told anyone. Silence, the school seemed to believe, was its own form of participation. When we tried to leave classroom 12B, the hallway outside no longer obeyed the rules of space. The walls curved inward, lockers sagged as if made of wax, and the floor rippled beneath our feet. Tania grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin as she begged me not to let go. The school was no longer pretending to be real. It was peeling away its mask, showing us that we were standing inside something shaped by memory rather than concrete.
The moment I turned back, Rifat was gone. His voice cut off mid-sentence, leaving behind an echo that didn't fade. All that remained was a single shoe near an overturned chair, as if the school had erased him between one blink and the next. I wanted to shout his name, but no sound came out. Somewhere deep inside, I knew the truth before the fear caught up. The school had finished with him.
Only Tania and I remained, standing in a hall that felt far too large for just two people. The exit sign flickered weakly in the distance, offering hope that felt almost cruel. My phone vibrated one last time, displaying a message that made my chest tighten. 2 remain, 1 truth, 1 exit. As I looked at Tania, I realized the school wasn't done testing us. It was narrowing its focus, preparing for the final question.
Tania stopped walking and stood beneath the flickering exit sign, her breath uneven as if she had been holding something inside for far too long. She finally admitted that on the night the school closed, she had heard the fire alarm and the screams, but chose not to call anyone. She told herself it wasn't her responsibility, that someone else would handle it. The school seemed to respond to her confession with silence, a silence that felt heavier than any sound, as if it were weighing her words and deciding what they were worth.
A shadow stretched across the wall ahead of us, taller than any human, and completely still. We never saw the figure that cast it, but we could feel its attention pressing down on us. The school had stopped hiding behind moving walls and written rules. It was watching us directly now, waiting to see if we would lie, confess, or run. In that moment, I understood that the school wasn't haunted by ghosts. It was haunted by choices.
2 hallways appeared before us where none had existed before, splitting the school into a choice we never asked for. A sign hung between them, stating clearly that only one may leave. Tania looked at me, her eyes searching for reassurance I couldn't give. The school wasn't asking us to solve a puzzle. It was asking us to decide who deserved to be forgiven and who would remain as part of its endless memory.
As I stared into a cracked mirror along the wall, memories I had buried surfaced with brutal clarity. I remembered filming that night, capturing the chaos on my phone instead of helping, telling myself it was evidence, not entertainment. I had watched the guard run into the smoke and done nothing but record. The reflection staring back at me looked older, heavier, as if the school was showing me the weight I had been carrying all along. The walls around us began to glow faintly, words forming slowly as if written by the building itself. It told us that remembering what happened was not the same as atoning for it, and that silence, fear, and curiosity could all be forms of guilt. The school wasn't angry, and that terrified me more than rage ever could. It wasn't seeking revenge. It was seeking balance.
The room shifted again, as if guided by a force we couldn't see. The desks moved themselves into a circle, candles igniting one by one without a spark. The shadows around us began to twist unnaturally, reaching and recoiling in rhythm with the flame. The school had made its intentions clear. A ritual was about to happen, and participation was no longer optional. Tania and I stood frozen, realizing that we were no longer visitors. We were part of its design.
On the desk, a glowing envelope appeared, hovering slightly above the surface. I picked it up, hands trembling, and unfolded it. Inside was a single line, written in a script that seemed alive. 1 must remain. 1 may leave. The choice was no longer theoretical. The school demanded action, and the air around us felt heavy, weighting, almost sentient. I looked at Tania, hoping she would speak first, but the weight of the decision silenced her. Tania finally whispered that she would stay. Her voice trembled and her eyes filled with tears, but there was resolve there too. She explained that she had felt responsible for what happened the night the school closed, and she believed that choosing to remain was the only way to atone. I tried to protest, but she held my arm with a strength I didn't know she had, and the room's shadows seemed to lean toward her, welcoming her sacrifice.
Before I could stop her, Tania began to fade, her body dissolving into the shadows like smoke caught in the candlelight. Her face remained calm, almost serene, as though she had made peace with what was happening. I lunged toward her, but my hands passed through nothing. The shadows swallowed her completely, leaving behind only the faint echo of her voice, whispering that I should live and remember. The ritual was complete. When the shadows finally receded, I was alone. The school looked normal again, as if nothing had happened. Candle flames had burned out, desks were in their original places, and the silence was heavier than any scream. But I knew differently. Tania's choice had changed the balance, and I was free to leave. Yet every step I took toward the exit carried the weight of her absence, and the school's presence lingered like a quiet heartbeat behind my own. As I ran down the endless hallway, the exit finally appeared ahead, glowing faintly, as if inviting me to leave. My heart pounded in my chest, every step echoing louder than the last. The shadows along the walls stretched unnaturally, twisting toward me as if trying to pull me back. I didn't look behind me. I couldn't. All I could focus on was reaching the door and stepping out of the nightmare that had become Blackridge High School. Even as the door grew closer, I could hear whispers echoing behind me. They weren't words I recognized, just fragments. Pleas, laughter, accusations. The walls seemed to ripple with them, the shadows bending and twisting to mimic shapes I thought I remembered. It felt like the school was reminding me that leaving was never as simple as crossing a threshold. Some part of it would always follow, and I could feel the weight of Tania's absence pressing against my mind. I froze as a cold, shadowy hand rested lightly on my shoulder. My body wanted to scream, my mind wanted to run, but my legs refused to move. I knew it wasn't human. It wasn't Tania, yet it carried the same weight, the same judgment. The school had not finished its test. It had only delayed its decision. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to move, step by step, toward the exit that now felt impossibly far. A flash of movement caught my eye. There she was, Tania, standing in the middle of the hallway, her figure slightly translucent, glowing softly in the dim light. She smiled, a mixture of sorrow and reassurance, and extended her hand toward me. I reached out, but the moment my fingers brushed hers, she dissipated into the shadows, leaving only warmth and memory. The school wasn't cruel. It was a mirror, showing me what courage and sacrifice really meant. Finally, I reached the door and stepped through. Rain soaked my hair and clothes immediately, a harsh contrast to the cold stillness inside. The school faded behind me like mist, the shadows retreating, the whispers silenced. I was free to leave, but the memory of Tania, the choices, and the school itself would follow me forever. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Blackridge High had shown me everything, and I was forever changed. I walked away from the school, each step splashing through the rain-soaked pavement, feeling the weight of silence settle over me. It looked like any other night, except nothing felt ordinary anymore. Every shadow, every flicker of light reminded me of what had happened inside. Tania's absence pressed against me like a memory I could touch but never hold. I had left, but part of me remained, tethered to the school's judgment. My phone buzzed again. A single message from Nabil glowed on the screen. I am part of it now. My chest tightened. The school's influence didn't end at its walls.
Those it took remained within it, a part of its endless memory, watching, waiting, influencing. I understood then that leaving didn't mean escape, it meant survival, and survival carried its own guilt. Weeks later, I glimpsed her shadow in my apartment, flickering in the corner of the room, faint but unmistakable. She didn't speak, didn't move toward me, but her presence was enough to remind me that the school never truly lets go. Some part of what we experienced remains in those it touches, a haunting reminder of choices made, sacrifices given, and lives altered forever. I realized then that the school had changed me. Fear, guilt, memory, and understanding were intertwined inside me now. The experience was not something I could explain. The world outside continued as if nothing had happened, but I knew differently. Blackridge High was alive in memory, alive in consequence, and part of its ritual was now etched into my soul forever.
As I walked down the empty street, I caught a reflection in a puddle. There it was, Blackridge High, towering, dark, impossible, and alive, even miles away. I shook my head, telling myself it was a trick of light and memory, but deep down, I knew the truth. The school waits for those who dare to remember, for those who dare to survive, and for those who carry the weight of guilt. And I knew with certainty that it would never let me or anyone truly go.